You are standing in line at the checkout, your card already tapped against the reader, watching the number $43.12 hang there on the little screen. Payday is still 2 days away. Here is what you will come to understand before this is over. Most of the wealthiest people in the country did not get there as employees. Roughly 3/4 built businesses. Another chunk are investors. A small slice inherited what they have. The remainder built a rare skill nobody else could copy. But none of that is really the point. The point is not the size of the income at all. It is how that income gets managed. The same structure run on purpose instead of by accident. Every month, 6 figures land in your account, and every month you have handled it purely on instinct, never on a plan. That realization is where everything else begins. You walk out of the store empty-handed. The $4,312 balance made the decision for you before you even reached the counter, and you drive home in the BMW you leased 11 months back. Alpine white paint, 19-inch wheels, $649 a month before insurance is added on. You keep telling yourself the payment is manageable. It always feels manageable, right up until the moment it stops being so. At a red light, your phone lights up. It's Danielle from the office sending a photo of her new bag, a black caviar leather Chanel flap with gold hardware, close to $11,000 at retail. Finally treating myself, she writes underneath. You send back a heart emoji. You don't mention that you haven't looked at your Amex balance in 9 days because you already have a rough idea what it says. And rough is somehow worse than exact, because rough means some part of you has given up wanting the real figure. Back home, you unclasp the Cartier Tank Must, the quartz version, not the automatic, still costing $2,150 when you swiped for it back in March, and you set it on the dresser beside a stack of unopened mail. You earn more than nearly anyone you grew up with. Your parents ask how the job is going, and you tell them it's great, and you mean it. That's the confusing part. The job really is great. The number on your offer letter was real. Somewhere between that number and this apartment, most of it disappeared, and you've never been able to trace exactly where. Here's something that would shock the version of you from 5 years back. The one who assumed 6 figures would make the tightness in your chest go away automatically. It doesn't. Not on its own. Not unless you actually decide to change something. Close to half of Americans earning 6 figures or more are living the same paycheck-to-paycheck cycle you are. The same tension at checkout. The same silent math before the card taps. The same stretch of days I spent avoiding the app. A high income was supposed to be the finish line. For a lot of people driving leased German cars and wearing nice watches, it's really just a bigger treadmill. You used to assume the issue was that you simply didn't earn enough. Now you're starting to suspect the real issue was never the number on the paycheck at all. It's what happens to that number in the 48 hours right after it lands. How much of it silently gets funneled toward things designed to make you look successful, instead of things that would actually make you secure. A car payment meant to impress a valet. A bag built to photograph well. A watch nobody at work has ever actually asked to see up close. None of that desire is inherently wrong, but wanting those things financed by whatever happens to be left after rent clears is a completely different thing than being able to afford them. Until tonight, you hadn't let yourself sit with that difference. You open the banking app again, not because the balance will look any different, but because some part of you finally needs to really look instead of glancing away. $4,312. You stare at it longer than necessary. And underneath the embarrassment, something else starts to stir. Not full panic, more like the first hint of a question you haven't had the courage to ask yet. Not how do I earn more, but where is it actually all going? That question doesn't get answered tonight. But 2 days later, something forces you to stop avoiding it. 2 days after that, you're at the register at the grocery store, phone in hand, watching the card reader blink and reject your Amex twice. The cashier waits. The person behind you shifts their weight. You tap your Visa instead, it goes through, and you leave with a bag of groceries and a sick feeling in your stomach that has nothing to do with hunger. That night you call Renee, your friend from college, who now manages a boutique gym in Jersey City, because she's the one person you can say this to without any performance attached. My Amex got declined, you tell her, almost like it's a joke. She doesn't laugh. She asks the question you've been dodging for 9 days. How much do you actually owe on it? You pull up the app. This time you don't glance, you actually read the number. $6,740, almost exactly the national average for people who carry a balance instead of paying it off monthly, though you had no idea of that at the time. What you did notice right away was the interest rate sitting next to it. 21.49%. You'd seen that figure before, buried in fine print you always scrolled past to get to the total. You had never once sat down and worked out what it actually cost you. Right there on the bed, you pull up the calculator on your phone and finally do math. You've avoided for 2 years. Minimum payment, $135 a month. At that rate, on that balance, if you never charge another cent to the card, it would take nearly 14 years to pay off, and you'd hand the bank almost as much in interest as the original balance. 14 years from now, you'd be 43. You think about the Cartier sitting on your dresser, the $649 car payment, the days each month you avoid checking your statement on purpose, and for the first time you understand clearly that this debt isn't background noise in your life. It's a second rent you agreed to without ever signing a lease for it. Renee doesn't lecture you. She just says, quietly, I did the exact same thing with an away suitcase and a Cartier bracelet I bought myself for my 30th birthday. Took me 2 years to dig out from under it. She's not bragging when she names the brands. She's just being precise, the way someone describes the exact shape of an old scar. You realize you've never once heard her talk about money this openly before. You always assumed she simply had it all figured out. What actually surprises you isn't the debt itself. You already had a vague sense you owed something. What surprises you is how much of your monthly income, the 6 figures you brag about to your parents, is already claimed before you get to make a single choice. The minimum payment, the lease, the card you tap, without thinking at the grocery store. None of it felt like a decision in the moment it happened. All of it is a decision now, showing up as one number that only ever moves in the wrong direction. You don't fix anything that night. You just stop pretending you don't understand the shape of it. And underneath the fear, a smaller, steadier feeling begins to take hold. If you built this mess without noticing, maybe you can dismantle it the same way, on purpose this time, starting with the part of your paycheck that isn't already spoken for. 3 weeks after your card got rejected at the register, your coworker Devin, who handles paid media 2 desks over, limps into the office showing everyone a photo of his Jeep Wrangler on a flatbed tow truck. Transmission, he says, $4,200 to fix. He financed the Jeep 18 months ago and still owes more than it's worth, and now the repair is going onto the same card already carrying his ski trip from January. You watch him laugh about it in the break room, the kind of laugh that's really just panic dressed up nicer. It's Priya from accounting, who shows you the other version of that same story. Later that week, over coffee, she insists on buying. Because you'd been quiet all morning, she tells you her Subaru got rear-ended on the turnpike back in March. $9,000 in damage, not her fault, but the other driver's insurance took 6 weeks to pay out. She didn't panic. She had money sitting in an account earning real interest, set aside for exactly this kind of morning. She paid the shop directly and waited for reimbursement without missing a single bill. It's not that I'm rich, she tells you, it's that at some point, I decided not to be one bad week away from a crisis. That night, you sit down and do something you've genuinely never done. You write out your real monthly baseline, not your lifestyle, just survival. Rent at $2,150, utilities, groceries, insurance, the minimum payment on your card debt. You leave the car lease off on purpose because a car you can't truly afford isn't part of your baseline. It's a decision you're still paying off. The total comes to $3,380. You multiply that by 5, the way Priya described her own cushion, and land on $16,900. 5 months of floor beneath you in case the ground ever gives way. You don't have that. You have $312 sitting in a Chase savings account that earned you a grand total of 9 cents in interest over the past year. You actually check because something Priya said stung a little. So you open a Marcus by Goldman Sachs account right there on the couch, currently paying close to 4.1% APY, over 400 times what Chase gave you on the same dollar. You move $200 into it that night. It isn't the $16,900. It isn't even close. But it's the first time in longer than you can remember that money has moved in a direction you actually chose instead of one that simply happened to you. You think about Devin's Jeep on the flatbed and realize the real emergency wasn't the transmission. It was that he had nowhere for the cost to land except more debt. You think about the Cartier still sitting on your dresser, unsold, unshamed. This isn't about giving everything up. It's about building a floor underneath yourself before reaching for anything else. 5 months of cushion, one automatic transfer at a time, so that the next flatbed tow truck, yours or someone else's, doesn't get to decide what happens to you next. Once that floor exists, quietly earning its 4%, a different question starts tugging at you. What should the rest of your money actually be doing while you sleep? Open enrollment shows up in your inbox on a Tuesday, and normally you'd skim past it, but this year you actually click into the benefits portal. There's a field asking how much of your paycheck to route into your 401k, and beside it, in small gray text, a note that your employer will match up to 4%. You'd seen that line every year since you started this job. This is the first year you actually understand what it means. Free money your company will hand you the moment you ask for it. Every year before this one, you simply never asked. You bring it up at your cousin Tyler's 4th of July cookout, mostly because his Uncle Frank is there, the retired high school chemistry teacher who drives a 10-year-old Camry and still lives in the same modest house he bought back in 1994. Somehow he's the one who quietly covered the whole family's dinner tab before anyone noticed. Half joking, you ask him how a teacher's salary turns into that kind of generosity. He tells you he opened an IRA at 26 and never touched it again. Just let it sit and compound while he lived an unremarkable, ordinary life. Later, by the cooler, Tyler admits he only started investing 2 years ago at 34, and he's putting in double what Frank ever contributed, trying to close the gap. He shows you his brokerage app, frustration in his voice. The math doesn't care how hard he tries to catch up. Frank's early dollars had 30 extra years to compound. Tyler's aggressive dollars are racing the clock and losing. Standing there with a paper plate in hand, you realize the version of you sitting on $312 a month ago wasn't just short on money. She was short on years. That week, you open a Roth IRA and set up an automatic $400 monthly transfer, after-tax money that grows completely untouched by taxes for the rest of your life. You bump your 401k contribution up to the full 4% your company matches, because Frank's voice is still in your head, calling it money you're allowed to have and simply never claimed. Inside both accounts, you don't chase anything flashy. You build the same simple 3-fund setup Frank described over paper plates, 60% into a total U.S. stock index fund, 30% international, 10% bonds. So the whole thing has a built-in shock absorber. Over the last decade, the S&P 500 alone has averaged close to 12.4% a year, never a guarantee, but it's exactly how Frank's untouched dollars from 1994 quietly became a paid-off Camry and a covered dinner tab. Nobody ever saw him settle for less. You set the transfers to happen automatically the same day your paycheck lands before you can talk yourself into spending it elsewhere. Nothing lights up on the screen. You just close the app and go about your evening, and for once the money moving without asking your permission is exactly the point. The cushion protects you. The automated growth is supposed to quietly build wealth while you're not watching. But none of that addresses the other side of your paycheck, the side still leaking out through your closet door. Your friend Sydney gets engaged in June, and the group chat explodes with photos from a rooftop bar downtown where it happened, string lights, a $22 cocktail in her hand, and on her wrist, catching the light in every photo, a white gold Rolex Datejust. She bought it for herself to celebrate, she tells everyone. What she doesn't mention, and what you only learn because she confides it to you privately in the bathroom line, is that it's on 4 payments of $1,875 through a buy now, pay later plan, on top of the Chanel bag she financed back in April that she still owes $600 on. You used to be Sydney. 11 months ago, you were living this exact story. The lease, the watch, the declined card at the grocery store standing under different string lights. You don't judge her for it. You recognize it the way you'd recognize your own handwriting on someone else's page. That night, you go home and open your bank statement. Not hunting for a crisis this time, just looking honestly. You count 4 streaming subscriptions, one you haven't opened since February. A gym membership you've used twice since January, $210 a month, auto-renewing like it has permission to. Food delivery 11 times in the last 30 days, averaging $34 a delivery. None of it felt like a decision when it happened. Each one was just a tap, a passing moment, a small yes that never got revisited. You don't cancel everything at once because you know from experience that kind of sudden restriction just snaps back harder later. Instead, you give yourself one rule. Anything over $75 that isn't already budgeted has to wait 7 days before you buy it. You test it 2 weeks later, standing in front of a pair of designer sneakers at an outlet store, $495 of distressed leather, the kind everyone at the office seems to wear. You want them the way you wanted the Cartier. You put your card away and set a reminder for a week out. 7 days later, you don't want them anymore, not because you talked yourself out of it. The pull just quietly faded once the moment that created it had passed. You buy a $68 pair of plain shoes instead, ones that you'll actually wear to work every day, and you feel something closer to relief than deprivation. You keep your essential expenses, rent, insurance, debt payments, groceries, sitting around 62% of your take-home pay, comfortably inside the range Priya once described as the line between people who look wealthy and people who quietly become it. You cancel 2 of the 4 streaming subscriptions. You drop the pricey gym for a $30 a month, 3 blocks from your apartment that you actually use because the fancy lobby was never what kept you working out. None of this makes for an interesting rooftop party story. Nobody photographs a canceled subscription. You still see Sydney's Rolex in every group chat photo. You still feel that small pull when it catches the light, and this time you let yourself feel it instead of pretending you don't. Wanting things was never the problem. Buying them with money you didn't have yet, that was the part quietly running your life without your consent. And the strange part is, cutting all of that doesn't leave you feeling deprived. It leaves you feeling like you finally have money left over that isn't an apology to yourself. Your phone buzzes one Tuesday morning. The automated transfer notification, $400 moving into your retirement account, same as every payday. So, routine now, you almost don't read it. Almost. This time you stop and actually look at the running total. Your Roth IRA has crossed $4,900. Nobody sends you a congratulations text for this. There's no rooftop, no photo, no string lights, just a number quietly growing while you make your coffee, and somehow that's become one of your favorite moments of the week. Renee calls that weekend with an idea, a long weekend away for a friend's wedding. Flights running around $340 round trip. Old you would have either said no out of guilt, watching the checking account balance like it might bite, or said yes and put the whole trip on the card without checking anything, the way you used to with the Cartier. This time you open your budget instead. You've been setting aside 15% of your paycheck into a separate account. You don't touch for anything except exactly this. No name for it beyond joy, which felt embarrassing to type into the app the first time and doesn't anymore. There's $1,100 sitting in it. The trip, the wedding gift, dinner out, it all fits with room to spare. You say yes to Renee without the usual flicker of dread, not because the trip stopped costing money, but because for the first time the money already existed before the yes did. Standing outside the church before the ceremony, you put on the Cartier tank must. The same watch that sat on your dresser 11 months ago beside mail you couldn't bring yourself to open. You never sold it. You just stopped needing it to prove anything. It's paid off now, finished back in March, and wearing it today feels completely different than the night you first set it down. Same watch, different person wearing it. Renee notices it at the reception and asks if you finally treated yourself to something new. No, you tell her, it's the same one. It's just actually mine now, not a monthly balance pretending to be. She goes quiet for a second, the way you did in your bedroom that night with the calculator open, like she's running the same math on her own wrist. You don't lecture her. You've learned that the version of you a year ago wouldn't have listened to a lecture either. She needed the $43.12, the declined card, the 14-year payoff math to actually feel it before anything could change. Nobody talks you out of the trap. You just eventually notice you're standing in it. On the flight home, you open the banking app again, out of habit now more than worry. Your stability cushion is climbing toward $9,200 on its way to that 5-month floor. Your retirement accounts are growing on their own schedule, untouched. Your essentials are still capped, still boring, still working, and you've got $46 left in the Joy account, spent exactly the way it was meant to be on a weekend you'll actually remember. You still earn the same $128,000 you made a year ago. Nothing about the number on your paycheck has changed. What changed is what happens to it in the gap between landing in your account and disappearing out of it. That gap, the one you never used to even glance at, turns out to be where the entire difference was living the whole time, and now that gap belongs to you. You still check the app sometimes, out of habit, not fear. That's the part nobody warns you about, how quiet things get once the panic finally leaves. The cushion sits there. The transfers happen without you. The watch is just a watch now, not a confession. Tomorrow you'll probably still see Sydney's Rolex in a group chat photo, and some part of you will still want it, and that's fine. Wanting was never the problem. Tomorrow the rent still comes out. The debt payment still stings a little. The 7-day rule will still get tested in front of something shiny you don't need. None of it fixes itself permanently. You just get to choose every single payday what happens inside that small gap between the number landing and the number disappearing. That gap is yours now. What you build inside it next is still an open question.